Hello, my name is Erica Garcia, and this is my presentation on qualitative research. So qualitative research is a means of collecting research that is question-based. So they're going to ask questions. They can be open-ended questions. Some of the questions can be scale questions, like on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10. And that's going to be all dependent on the researcher and or true or false, not true or false questions, I'm sorry, yes or no response questions. Okay. What is the purpose of qualitative research? The purpose is to identify and gain a better understanding of a phenomenon. And again, how they do this is based off of asking those open-ended questions. Okay, so characteristics of qualitative research. The purpose is to gain the perspective of the participants, the focus group, and try and translate that over into the data. And the data is collected through interviews, pictures, observations, either done in person or recorded. And then they use that data from the focus groups to um, create a theme and interpret what this theme might mean. Um, One of the flaws to this type of research is that it's very hard for the researcher to be unbiased and try and collect the data without any of their bias motives behind it. Um, and the researchers are the ones who create the protocols and decide the people to study, their environments. Like if you want to study a sixth grade classroom, you have to decide, okay, what is my demographic going to be? Is it going to be rural or urban? Is it going to be mostly minorities? Is it going to be more white groups? So it just depends on the researcher and what the purpose of their study is. Okay, so types of the qualitative data. You can use observations, interviews or questionnaires, uh, audio visual, or documents. So with observations, you would collect the data at a specific site of your choosing. And when you're doing these observations, you're actually sitting there and seeing what's happening while it's happening. Um, you're taking your notes, you're writing down things that the group is saying or whomever you're observing. So if you're in a classroom setting, you're writing down what you see, what you hear, who's saying it. Is it a teacher? Is it a student? Is it in a group work? Is it written down on a notebook? So you're making those observations. And sometimes the observer can choose to participate in the observation and be a part of it. So if it's like a class activity, and I would say this wouldn't be research, but this would be something that I see like when administrative walks in. So most of the time, at least my admin, they walk in and they'll sit with the students and ask them questions, like, what are you guys learning? How did you do that? Um, what is your activity about? Try and gain some perspective of what the students are doing. So in that case, that would be an observation in which the observer is participating. Um, there are times when you can observe without participating. I've also seen this where people come in and they just observe the classroom and they're not really interacting with the teacher or they're not interacting with the students. They're writing down what they observe. And then there are times where you can be within your research, you could decide to do both. You don't have to just stick to, I'm an observer who participates or I'm an observer who does not participate. You can choose depending on what is best suited for you and your research. Okay, so interviews. This is another way to collect data for qualitative research. Some interviews tend to be one-to-one. If you have a large group, This will be a lengthy process if you decide to interview just doing one-to-one. It can do a whole focus group and where you interview a group of 4 to 6 people. You can do an interview that is phone based. You can do interviews over the phone. You can have like a website in which the participants could log in and answer questions, or even email response. These questions that are in the interview are made by the researcher in order to collect the data that they are searching for in their research. The other type of data would be audiovisual. So I find that this probably would be the best, even if you are doing in person observations, because you can go back and watch video to see what you recorded. Um, if you're doing voice recording, I find that that's really good too, because sometimes, when you're in the conversation, jotting down notes, you may not write everything exactly down how it happened, or you might forget something. So recordings, voice recordings are good. And then pictures, I think pictures is a good way to maybe document some of the things, um, and then kind of reflect back. You can also, get a lot of information for pictures, like just like they say, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Okay, and then you can use documents, and there's two main types of documents. There's the public documents, which would be our newspaper clippings, meeting minutes, memos, and public records. Private documents would be somebody's journal or diary, personal letters, or notes that they wrote down. And then something that could be considered either or would be a website, because you can gain information from websites or an email. Okay, analyzing the data. So you got to organize your data first, transcribe it, and then analyze it, code your data, and then find themes, and then represent and interpret what your findings are. Okay, so one of the research designs that could be used as in qualitative research would be the phenomenological research design. I'm sorry, and this is of course done through interviews. And in this design, this is basically storytelling from the persons, or group in which you are studying, or which the researcher is studying. And so when you're doing these interviews, you're trying to get an understanding of the actions, the experiences in which that person had, how they see it through their perspective, what their feelings were, and so forth. The next research design that's very popular in qualitative is the grounded theory. And in this type of research design, the researcher is using the data to develop a theory and ground it. This type of design was actually created by Glasser and Strauss, who were two um, they were two psychologists that came up with this theory. And in this type of research design, there is the use of inductive and deductive design. Okay, ethnographic research design. This is usually used more to when researchers are studying a specific type of group or culture, um, from observing, describing, documenting, and analyzing. And so, in this type of research design, the researcher is trying to take something that's foreign from their world and make it make sense to their world. So they try to describe um, almost how like what something is happening in that culture, how it would be related to or similar to something within their culture. Case studies. So this is groups of people that you're studying, you're documenting, and collecting observations to test a theory about a particular group of people. Action research. So this type of design is the sole purpose is to use the data that's collected in the research to improve something and use that information to create a plan of action. So educational wise, what comes to mind for me is the House Bill 4545. With the pandemic, we had a lot of learning gaps in our students. And so this action based result would be our House Bill 4545, in which almost all students are getting the interventions within the school class or school day to help close or lessen the learning gaps in which they had over the past school year. Okay, research design as a mixed method. So, mixed method research design is when the researcher is combining both quantitative and qualitative research elements to answer their research question. And some within that design, I'm sorry, there's actually sub-designs. So there's convergent design, which is when the researcher is collecting both the qualitative and quantitative research at the same time. There's explanatory design, which is the quantitative research is done first, and then a qualitative research is done to explain the quantitative research. Exploratory design is when the qualitative research is collected first and then the quantitative research is there to give the numbers. So that way it's not seen as very biased. And then embedded design is when a researcher is having um, their research, they're in the middle of research, and then they have a second set of data that can appear at any time, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end of their first research that they're doing. They come up with this second research that is related to their first research. And these are my references that I used, or this is my reference that I used. Thank you.